Hi, and welcome to Horror Recapped. Today we will be examining 2005's Boy Eats Girl. Beware, spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie starts with a woman, Grace, concentrating on a painting she is making. Grace leaves this and goes to a basement where she sees a snake and ancient Christian sculptures. She goes further. There, she finds a book and begins to read through it, but she is startled by Father Cornelius, who appears behind her and speaks with his teeth clenched, saying, "This is a consecrated resting place for missionaries who strayed from the path." He closes the book and tells her never to come back. The next scene starts with a red car with 3 teenage boys and a girl driving to a house where they drop the girl off after school. The girl, Jess, leaves the car heading to the door while one of the boys, Nathan, is pressured by his friends to ask Jess out today. Nathan is afraid because he doesn't want to ruin the relationship between him and Jess. They arrive at school the next day, and he is shocked when his friends tell him that they had sent a message to Jess on his behalf, saying, "I have something important to tell you." Nathan is about to speak when he receives a text from Jess reading, "Okay, see you soon." Cheryl, who has been trying to get Nathan's attention, approaches him and tries to have a sexy conversation with him. Nathan understands and turns Cheryl down, but this doesn't stop Cheryl. Opposite the two are Kenneth and Charlotte in a car making out. Charlotte stops sheepishly to ask Kenneth about being her date to the disco party, but she is disappointed when he announces that he's going with Laura. Kenneth turns to see Cheryl and Nathan having a conversation from afar, and he smirks while watching them. Kenneth reports this to Cheryl's boyfriend, Sam. Sam is upset by this news, and he starts giving Nathan a hard time at school. Jess tries to sneak out of her house to meet Nathan, but she is stopped by her father, who appears behind her. Nathan, who is tired of waiting, goes home in the rain, sad. Jess eventually sneaks out through her window to meet Nathan, but doesn't see him when she gets there. Jess sees a note Nathan had planned to give her expressing the love he had for her. She is excited after reading this. Nathan, who is still on his way home, sees Jess in Kenneth's car. He misinterprets things, but Jess doesn't see him. Kenneth had offered Jess a ride because of the rain. Though Kenneth tries to shoot a shot at Jess, she turns him down instantly. Nathan's mom, Grace, is the woman at the beginning of the movie. Nathan is sad and begins drinking alcohol. He decides to hang himself, but later tries to free himself from the rope after he hears his mother's voice. She yells from the stairs, asking Nathan to turn off the loud music. Nathan, who is still trying to pull the rope off, is disoriented when his mom opens the door, resulting in his strangulation. Next, we see a flutter of distorted shots showing his mother perform a ritual on him. The next morning, a devastated Grace waits for her son to rise. She is happy to see Nathan, who seems to be unaware of what happened, but only complains of a sore throat. Nathan is at school talking to his friend, but leaves immediately after Jess approaches them. Back in Nathan's house, Father Cornelius comes to meet Grace, seeking his book which has brought missionaries from the dead. Grace denies taking any book, but the Reverend Father, before taking his leave, warns Grace to return the book before darkness is unleashed. Grace goes inside and opens the book she denied having. There is a torn page at the end of the book. Nathan is in the school toilet, standing in front of the mirror and staring at the bruises on his neck. He hides when he hears the voice of Sam and his friend, Kenneth and Shane. Jess goes to meet Nathan after school, but he is now more upset after hearing the nasty thing Kenneth told Sam and Shane he had done to Jess last night. Jess tries to read the letter she had seen the night before, but he calls her a slut. Jess, shocked and in tears, slaps Nathan and leaves the place. Nathan goes home sad. He notices weird changes in him. Food doesn't seem to have a taste on his tongue, and when he hits his head against a wall, the wall breaks. Also, while ironing, he had absent-mindedly placed the hot iron on his hand, and it hadn't hurt. Nathan is worried, but his mom assures him that they are just mere changes, and he would get better. It's finally the day of the disco party. Jess is having fun with Nathan's friends, Diggs and Henry, but Nathan doesn't want to be around her, so he ignores his friends at the party. Sam is at the party and places a lit cigarette on Nathan's hand. Nathan doesn't notice and leaves the place. Sam is annoyed by Nathan's attitude and decides to find another means to hurt Nathan using Jessica. Cheryl goes outside the party with Nathan. She kisses him, but she's surprised that he isn't responding. She finally realizes that Nathan is not aroused by this. She makes fun of him and leaves him alone. Nathan is outside and moved to tears, but he is attacked by Sam, who had followed them outside. He tries to keep his cool and not fight back, but he doesn't hold back anymore when Sam says things about getting Jess to be his. Nathan jumps on Sam and bites off the flesh of his cheek. He heads back home after this. Sam faints, but wakes up and bites his friend, Shane. This continues as Shane is seen biting another girl. Sam is outside his school when he sees his high school teacher, Craig, and tries to bite him. He finally succeeds in biting his teacher after a long chase. Nathan is sad and breathes heavily in his room. He is distracted by a knock on his window, and he opens the window to see Jess. She gives him a chance to explain why he called her a slut. Nathan apologizes, but advises Jess to stay away from him because he feels something is wrong with him and claims not to understand himself lately. Grace researches the book and zooms into a part where zombie was written, but she is distracted by a sound coming from the kitchen. She sees Nathan as he scrambles for the food he had poured on the kitchen floor. Grace comes clean and explains that Nathan committed suicide and died, but she brought him back to life with the help of a book and the ritual she had done. But it had gone wrong because she was missing an element. The side effects were that his heart doesn't beat, blood doesn't flow in his veins, he doesn't feel anything, and he hungers for flesh. Nathan remembers what happened last night and goes to the spot where he bit Samson. But things get worse when he sees blood spilled everywhere and the lifeless body of a girl. Nathan goes to report himself to the police, believing he had been the cause, but the police officer ignores him, believing it to be a prank. Nathan decides to find Sam himself. Grace locks Nathan in the garage when he eventually comes home and goes to seek help. The lust for flesh and blood begins to spread in the city, as a lot of humans are bit one way or the other. Diggs and Henry are out in the street and are dumbfounded to see all that has happened. They are lucky to escape the attacks, and they place a call to Jess to let her know what's happening. Then they both head to Nathan's house and find him in the garage. Diggs and Henry open the garage door for Nathan, but are scared when they see him because he looks like the flesh eaters they saw on the street. They drive to Jess's house. Grace goes to the church where she meets Father Cornelius, who tries to bite her. Grace, after struggling with him, grabs the snake and places it on his face, and he is bitten by it. Father Cornelius comes back to his senses after the snake bite. Grace doesn't ask any questions, but leaves with the snake. Nathan and his friends are at Jess's house, and the two put their differences aside. Jess gets a machine, and she shreds a large amount of those flesh eaters into pieces. They enter a room but are attacked by the flesh eaters who manage to escape. Grace bursts into the room with her car and throws the snake at Nathan. She drives out before she is attacked. Nathan and his friends are about to set the room on fire after spilling petrol. They start the fire, and the snake bites Nathan on the leg. But as they try to leave, Nathan is pulled by Shane. Jess, Diggs, and Henry call out Nathan's name, and after getting no response, they leave the room somber. Nathan, who had been pulled, didn't get burnt by the fire because his jacket got hooked to a piece of wood. Diggs limps as he cries about everything that just happened, but Jess consoles him. They begin to run for their dear life when they hear the sound of a bike approaching them, but turn to see Nathan looking like his old self once again. Diggs and Henry are confused and upset at the same time, having thought that he had died. Nathan stops his bike right in front of them. The movie ends with Nathan saying, "Jess, I have something to ask," and she replies saying, "The answer is yes." They kiss, with Diggs and Henry having a confused look on their faces. That's going to wrap up this recap. We hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please click the subscribe button with notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video.